Miles Palacios.
Here.
Here. Alfredo Moreno.
Here.
Harvey Minor.
Here.
Lisa Montblanco.
Here.
Okay, we have no proposed action resulting from executive session. So that moves us along to our proclamation tonight. We will National Native American Heritage Month, and I will kick it off. Whereas each year Americans observe National Native American Heritage Month by affirming and acknowledging the culture, heritage, innumerable contributions, and by raising awareness of the ongoing challenges faced by Native Americans. And
whereas the national observance began in 1990, and
whereas THPRD honors and values the unique and rich contributions of all community members and strives to create a welcoming and inclusive park and recreation system that is accessible and welcoming to everyone. And
whereas the THPRD community is strengthened and made better by the many significant contributions of Native and Indigenous tribes and communities that have long made these lands their home. And
whereas Indigenous people have handed down oral histories, science, governance, a distinct relationship with nature, and continue to contribute to the cultural, educational, and spiritual fabric of our community. And
whereas THPRD recognizes that the district rests on the Native lands and was originally home to the Tualatin Kalapuya, affiliated with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And
whereas we honor the rich diversity of the people we serve and have much work to do to develop active partnerships with the Native American community today. And
whereas THPRD is committed to honoring the history, culture, and traditions of Indigenous peoples and affirm our commitment to stand with Indigenous peoples against systemic racism. And
now, therefore, the Board of Directors of the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District does hereby declare the month of November 2023 as National Native American Heritage Month, and do urge all those in the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District to support and promote this observance.
thank you. You mentioned some of the things that the district is doing to commemorate this month. Obviously, heightening visibility, posters and display, and incorporating Native American heritage subjects into after-school programs and things of that nature. I want to call out kind of the storybook walk at the Nature Center that's highlighting a Native American author. Also that the district is working with community organizations like the Five Oaks Museum to leverage their experience and expertise in this area. We are looking at our land acknowledgement, continuing our partnership with the Regional Land Acknowledgement Alliance, simply to make sure this is not just a thing you read on paper that just doesn't change and loses all of its meaning. So definitely appreciate that work to keep it relevant and vibrant and modern. So the naming process that we have for our parks and facilities, extremely proud of that. And that work has been done with intentional involvement and guidance and leadership from tribal community members. And of course, Talking Walls, one of which very close to my house at Railway Park, which has features the work of Indigenous artists and is a really lovely addition to that park. And I would love to see more of it throughout the district. So hope you're around been in that park, which people in this room certainly have. Encourage you all to go if you're one of our legions of fans following us online. So we are to agenda item number 5, audience time.
Do you for this evening?
So shouting into the mic.
No, girl.
Just can't help myself.
You're committed to ensuring everyone can hear you.
Okay.
That's very nice.
Yes, I am. Okay. Tim, hello.
There.
Good to see you. Welcome.
You.
Let's see. I believe I need to. Oh, you do it?
we've never. Could you? Thank you for joining. I think just a reminder that we've got 3 minutes, and if you could please state your name and your address for the record, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Board President and board members. My name is Tammy Carpenter. I live at 8405 Southwest Power Court, and I'm here to express appreciation for the proclamation on the Native American History Month. Where's my phone's not turning on? Give me a second. Sorry. And you know, and it's long overdue for us to have a reckoning with how the Native people of Turtle Island were treated from the moment that the Europeans landed. We have words now to describe what we did, the European colonizers, but then we, had words that we used that were not very subtle. We said Indian removal, and we kept removing them and removing them. And that is a form of ethnic cleansing. I think we can probably all agree that term wasn't in use then, but I think we can all agree looking back. Additionally, the term genocide, I think is very interesting to think about in terms of our Native population. That particular act means killing members of groups, causing serious bodily harm and mental harm to members of the group, inflicting conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So I think we can also I feel comfortable saying that we also were committed a genocide against the Native people over here. And I like to think, and there were people at the time that knew it was wrong. They knew it was wrong, and many of them did act. There were not enough brave people. I like to think that I would have been one of those brave people. And if I were to live during a time of a genocide, I feel like I would do everything I can to make that end. Lay my body on the track, whatever it takes, because I have to be able to tell my grandchildren in 30 years what I did and how we were able to stop this. So I hope we can all look at the ways we've treated people in the past and consider how we want to treat them in the present. And I appreciate you guys taking time to listen to me tonight.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, and Mr. Cantrell, if you would like to come to the mic, we would welcome your public testimony as well. And if you could, we've got a timer here, so 3 minutes. And if you could please state your full name and your address for the record, and then we will welcome your testimony.
Martin Cantrell. I carry the name of Joe Martin, who died on the Cherokee Trail of Tears. I live at 3445 Southwest 124th in Cedar Hills. And what else did you need?
That's it.
Thank you. That was a wonderful land acknowledgement, but I'm here for a simple purpose. I've been a journalist and an artist all my life. I attended school at the Old Cherokee Female Seminary in Oklahoma and got a degree in history in college there, and never once was the Trail of Tears brought up in my education there. It has been much worse other places. So as an artist, as an illustrator, I wanted to let you see. I took this rope. I decided to make the land acknowledgement visible, palpable. This rope, every millimeter equals 1 year, one trip around the sun. This is this year, just the tip of the fuzz. Okay? This is the flooding of Celilo Falls, which was the major trading and cultural center of the western part of the continent, 1957. This was the Treaty of 1855 that moved the river people off the river, moved them into the desert where they have festered, and you must know, it's a sad thing up there with the drugs and alcohol and continuing self-inflicted enforced genocide. This is Lewis and Clark, 1803. This is 1 millimeter per year. And this is the first Russian fur trader who appeared in the Pacific Northwest. The rest of this rope is how long we've been here, all the way around to Tammy. Actually, it's about 2 feet long because after I'd done it the first time for 14,000 years, they found the moccasins that are 18,000 years old. The man who did that is a friend of mine. We're working together. I can tell you that many organizations are working toward more acknowledgement. And I just wanted to show you guys this because I know you're intelligent people and you care, and I respect you highly. And knowledge makes strength. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Okay. We will. We're going to move on to agenda item number 6. Community Living Storytelling. Do I volunteer to lead off? Barbie is going to lead us off.
I will lead us off. I just want to take an opportunity and to thank Mr. Cantrell for joining us tonight and sharing with us such a powerful reminder. A reminder that these proclamations we develop, share, and read into the public record represent real people with real histories, and much of the time acknowledge and recognize a shared collective trauma for groups of people who historically have been and continue to be marginalized. I am absolutely in full support, value, and respect giving voice to celebrate Native American History Month. I also want to challenge us as a board to be mindful of how our actions may be perceived as performative and encourage us to hold ourselves as elected officials accountable for doing the hard work of dismantling the systems of oppression that we so publicly commit to doing in our mission statement, board values, etc. Personally, it feels disingenuous in this moment to acknowledge the legacy of a displaced people and the harm caused while we are all witnessing a genocide take place in front of our eyes in the war in Palestine. I commend the many local elected leaders, Representative Farah Chachi, Beaverton City Councilors Kevin Teeter, John Duggar, Nadia Hassan, Beaverton School Board Directors Tammy Carpenter, Sunita Garg, Justice Raji, Ugana and Igana, and my fellow board director, Tia Peen, who have joined the growing list of organizations such as the United Nations in demanding a ceasefire now. It is quite upsetting to see how many local electeds, most especially those who look like me, who have remained silent while scores of human lives, babies, and children continue to be killed by bombing day after day. Those of us in public service have an increased responsibility to hold each other accountable for advocating for the values we so often tout. When the time comes to actually speak truth to power, to elevate and amplify the voices of those most harmed, we must have the courage to use our privilege and speak out. I fear that the limiting trap of binary thinking only makes this moment more complicated. Speaking out immediately is deduced to choosing sides, when at the heart, it's rather simple. Denounce terrorism in all forms and protect innocent lives. We can hold multiple truths at once, and we must. Lives depend on it. Please join me in demanding a ceasefire now. Thank you.
Barbie? Anyone else? For time. Community reports. You have something?
Yeah, well, I'm mindful to respond to my colleague. So as of 8 a.m., no one has asked me to sign on to the letter aside from you. And so I'm mindful of what I am hearing from my constituents about, which is Cooper Mountain and pickleball courts. I'm extremely mindful of who hasn't signed on to the letter, and it gives me serious pause. These are mentors and colleagues and friends. I've also thought about what it means to be a park director and what we can influence, including the expansion of Cooper Mountain, which I've heard from our constituents about. So I so profoundly appreciate you sharing your voice. You are my colleague, you are my friend. And I'm just glad we're all using our voices in various ways. And I appreciate you.
Else from
Oh, I have other updates. Yeah, so I volunteered at New Day, which was fantastic. Best day of the year. I know everyone's like big truck day. Y'all, New Day. Awesome staff. I got to meet the wonderful Jackie, who was a I'm gonna mess up the name, Diversify.
Yeah.
It's not diversity, it's Diversify intern. And it was her first day, like as a full-time staffer. So, I was just swooning. It was great. We had 200 adults and like 163 kids. So I thought it was great, fun. I wanted to share just really quick update because I serve on the Expo committee. It's the Expo Advisory Committee. And you'll be shocked to hear that I'm the least sporty person on that committee. So they talk about things and I'm just like, I don't know what that is or would go to that. But I'm enjoying it and it's fun to be in that group. The profound challenge that this group is tasked with is how do we build something that will appeal to people across the country and help us bring big events that will help the economy and honor the horrific past of what it meant to have our Japanese American neighbors in that space and turned. And this is no small challenge. And so these are the tough conversations that we are just starting. And then I also wanted to share last Friday, Beaverton opened their first year-round, or they haven't opened, I apologize. They did a groundbreaking for their year-round shelter, which was amazing and wonderful. And a lot of our peers worked really hard to make sure that happened. Anyways, it's like right next to Griffith Park. And so anyways, these are going to be our new neighbors. I'm just appreciative of the work that's happening at the city of Beaverton around this, considering the homelessness crisis is impacting the Parks District, of course, and our community and each one of us. So anyways, lots of wonderful work happening around the community.
Last month. We had our board retreat, which was wonderful. Hopefully people watch it. People can watch it, right? I'm really excited about reinforcing all of the values and the things that we've done and the goals that we've created. And I'm thankful to staff for listening to all of us and listening to our ideas and thoughts. And as usual, always being so good of making sure that our district is guided in the way that we as a board envision for us. And so just want to say thank you again to our staff for always listening to us and making our job so easy and that you're able to encompass everything kind of that we want. And so it's not that hard for us to sit up here and be who we are. Other things that we did, I think we had joint committee last month also. My phone is not working. But I think there we had a great presentation for the levy that we've already had a presentation for. So that was presented to our advisory committee. So that was great. There was talks about the new Peter Court plan. And then also for those else who maybe wasn't at joint committee, they brought up a project for getting an induction table for Cedar Hills as one of their, group projects, which I think is lovely because Trace did the little cooking preschool class there this summer and he loved it. He always asks to make these tortillas again over and over. So thankful I have this recipe. But yeah, so it's a great idea. And so that's all I have.
This last month, myself, Director Monteblanco, and Chair Moreno, we went to the Willamette Falls Locks. It was a lovely tour of the locks and a great relationship building opportunity with Metro councilors, other electeds around the Metro area, both within our district and out. But I think a good opportunity to see what our peers are doing across this area. And opportunities to talk a little bit about what we've got going on here in THPRD. I also had the opportunity to attend Representative Haitham's constituent coffee listen in on the conversations with the community members that were present in that space, which was really a lot of fun. It was apparent that a big issue that is on the mind of a lot of folks in our community is around our houselessness a pandemic, really, with folks, but also greater conversations about how we can address that with a renewed emphasis on housing, both at the state level and local spaces. So it was just really, it made me feel happy and reaffirmed in the work that we're doing in the capacity that we as THPRD can. And glad that folks are still having that conversation with other electeds who may have the opportunity for impact at a state level. So I was really thankful to join that space with Representative Pham and got to chat with him a little bit, and we'll continue those chats.
Let's share quickly on I'm the Total Health Park Foundation Executive Director. Please report we have a robust field. We're most of the way through the screening and we'll be preparing to advance a small handful of folks to the next round, final round. Really pleased with who we've been able to attract and who's interested in this work and has done their research, and I'm optimistic we will end up with a great person to replace our great former executive director. I was really happy to attend the ORP meeting, networking mixer for staff of color. Thank you, Julie, for making sure I knew where I was going at the right time, the right place. Really cool just to see small but meaningful stair steps towards giving staff of color throughout Oregon Parks and Rec just space to be themselves, space to gather, and to let their respective leadership, if they're not already that this is important, that it means a staff that feels like they belong and are going to do great work for their districts and their communities. So awesome. Thank you to the district for events recently did was with us, which we were not able to attend, sadly, but I heard it was great. We were able to attend the Halloween event at Conestoga. Kudos to the whoever the gentleman was with apparently a very realistic, I'm blanking on his name, but the modern man, the gravelly boys, scared of the Jesus out of the fairy. So maybe like an Adam West type next year, but dating myself there, but no, but everything was great. He warmed up and had a great time. So and my daughter loved it. And finally, I just want to recognize and support my friend and colleague Barbie Miner for speaking her truth. I want to say Barbie and I have had some thoughtful conversations. Barbie knows I hope she knows I'm empathetic. I'm not fully aligned with everything. But I think we as peers, as community leaders, and I wish Tammy was still here, I think we're all bringing our authentic selves to the table, to the work. And when we're doing that, good things are going to happen. I hope we give each other the grace to learn and figure things out, and we keep leaning into our respective curiosity. And when folks don't agree with us, we take that time to think about, well, what am I missing that person is solid about that I'm not? How do we investigate each other a little bit more and figure out where we want to be? So it's a learning, growing process. We're all human beings, staff and electeds alike. So thank you all for bringing your whole selves to it. So we appreciate you. That said, moving on, time factor here. Right on time to the levy task force, agenda item number 8. I run a good meeting.
Wait. Have an action.
All right, all right. Agenda item number 7. I'm so proud.
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as submitted.
I will second.
Please call the roll.
Barbie Minor,
Yes.
Miles Palacios,
Yes.
Felicitas Monteblind,
Yes.
Tia Ping,
Yes.
Alfredo Marino.
Now you can go.
I'd like to move on to the levy task force. Thank you, Holly.
Fredo, I think you were just trying to move me along. I appreciate that. Okay, board members, I'm Holly Thompson, your communications director. And just to give you a quick reminder, this is a quick update. Not a lot of new information here for you, more of a process update because we'll be back next month. So just a reminder that in September, you appointed 13 folks to the levy task force. These are the folks, and I have to say you did a really good job appointing people who represent the district, who know THPRD from many different interests. We have folks in there who have kids in our preschool programs, our after-school programs that use the affiliated sports. We had folks that said the trails saved my life during the pandemic. It saved my mental health. We have Margaret Robinson on there, whose mom, Virginia, was our 4th board member and who had told us stories about walking with her mom and Elsie Sturr during the original campaign in the mid-50s to form the district. So we have felt that blessing on our shoulder in our work. And that legacy, and she brought in some materials to look at some of their original work that they did, which was very uplifting. And we have a member, Elizabeth Edwards, from our budget committee as well. So lots of great people on this committee. So what did we ask the task force to do? We gave them 3 focus questions to answer for us. Should we be going to the voters to talk about an operating levy? If so, what is the appropriate amount? And when should we go? 3 simple questions. We've had one at our first meeting, we focused on the budget. We took them through a really deep dive of what are our budget sources, where does the money come from, where does it go, what's causing pressure on our budget, what are the options that we've looked at, and if we have to live within a reduced budget, what would that look like? So we went through the different cut scenarios because, as you know, we're looking at a $16.5 million potential funding shortfall, and that represents 21% of our annual operating expenses. So a very significant funding shortfall. I would say the levy task force saw very quickly that none of the other options that we were looking at would fill that gap, and they understood very quickly the recommendation from staff of focusing on a levy. And then we also looked at the history. So we talked about some of the history of how Oregon did property measure limitations in the 1990s, how that set up the assessed value versus real market value, and our whole taxing system. So I got a deep dive on all of that. At our second meeting, we focused on public opinion research. So some of this information you've already seen in your board retreat, but we went over the polling information with them. And quick summary, that information showed that 3 out of 4 folks, 76% of the people we serve, are incredibly satisfied with THPRD services. For context out there, for folks that may be watching this at home, that's incredibly high. Most local governments right now would be sitting probably in the upper 50s to mid 60s, and we are polling higher than any other local government agency our pollsters have seen in a really long time, with the exception of the zoo. Everyone loves animals, so but we're parks and rabbits, so they like us too. Equally, people are not aware that we have a funding shortfall. So same, really similar numbers. 75% of folks don't know. So that's why that messaging that we're working on right now is so important. We did ask a series of questions about support for a levy, and we found that ultimately, when people were informed about the funding shortfall, when they understood what the funding would go to maintain park services and recreation services as we know today, 60% of highly likely voters are likely to support an operating levy asked from the district. So we also articulated that a potential levy could look like a 50-cent levy, and we articulated with highly likely voters, what would that levy help protect? What services would it maintain? And what we heard from voters is that they were most especially concerned with reductions in park services, particularly concerns around reductions in garbage collections, reductions in capital maintenance, reductions in cleanings of parks and cleanings of restrooms, and lots of concern over loss of staff. We talked about both the reductions in part-time and full-time staff, and then cascading results in reductions in classes and offerings, and seeing the elimination of after-school programs. All of those were a great concern to our voters. So where are we at and what are next steps? We did ask the levy task force members if they felt comfortable with their next meeting next week, being a time where they could reflect and be able to vote on those 3 questions. We heard uniformly from them, yes, they would be ready to vote on those questions. So we invited them to send us back any other areas you need information on, any other questions that you have. They took us up on that offer. So we've gotten about 12 questions that we've responded in writing. A lot of them are detailed and for Jared. And Jared will have homework at our 3rd task force meeting next week. They had a lot of questions about the assumptions in our analysis. So they want to hear a little bit more. You say that a 50-cent levy will take care of the district for 5 years. Jared, open up those spreadsheets and show us. I think they were kind of wondering, is that enough? Are you sure? So they want to go through his projections. They want to understand what we've assumed in there. They want to understand what does maintaining services look like. So we'll have a pretty deep discussion on that on the 15th. I was very clear with them that when we come back to the December board meeting, I will be speaking very little. I would like to have a couple of members of the task force actually be here to present their recommendations in their own words to you. So that is our plan, that at your December 13th board meeting, you will have members of the levy task force that will present their recommendations to you. And then in January, if you are so inclined, we would have the levy measure before you to consider whether you want to refer that to the voters. Then we would have paperwork and things to file with the county, all preparing us potentially for a May 21st local option levy 2024. So with that, that is kind of the overview. This is your last update you will see on this until you hear from the levy task force members themselves. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
That's the point of distinction. So we will hear from them in December, but then our vote will take place in January.
Yes. Yeah. We wanted you to have the opportunity to ask them questions, reflect and think, have dialogue, and then we'll come back with the formal language and the actual referral information that you can write.
Well, I like a great deal. Thank you. Right. Look closer at the program. We're on the 2008 bond program. Bruce and Tim, thank you.
Off highway, sorry.
Good evening, board members. I'm Tim Bonin, Development Supervisor, and along with me is Bruce Barbarash, Nature and Trails Manager. We're here tonight to provide an update on the remaining park and natural resources projects from the 2008 bond program. In 2008, THPRD passed a $100 million bond measure. Since then, staff had made a variety of land acquisitions, facility and park improvements, and conducted natural area restorations. Land acquisition is now complete, and there are 4 remaining projects scheduled for summer 2024. The natural restoration projects are the mouse. Can I move the mouse around?
Yes.
Is there a mouse?
That's just the trackpad.
Oh, it is giant. Okay. The three projects, natural restoration projects are Rock Creek Greenway. Sorry, it's going Rock Creek I'm just going to point, Rock Creek Greenway, Bronson Creek Greenway, and Raleigh Swim Center Park. And the remaining park project is a youth athletic field at in the southwest quadrant of the district at Mountain View Champions Park. The remaining, as shown in this chart here, the remaining project that we have to complete is the youth athletic field. And here is the location. So the youth athletic field is actually a multi-purpose sports court, which will be located at Mountain View Champions Park. As shown here, the sports court will be located in the undeveloped portion of the park. And this is the concept plan that we presented to the board back in February 2022. As a refresher, the sports court will be striped for futsal and 3 pickleball courts. It will have its own parking lot with lights and a pathway connection back to the park. And in this slide here, just an example, this is Cedar Hills Park. It'll look very similar to that multi-purpose court there. And then the site to the right, just above the green grass, you can see the split rail fence. That's the undeveloped portion of the park property. And we actually intended to build this sport court this summer, but we did not receive any competitive bids. But we have the whole package together and we'll put it back out for bid this winter and plan to build it in summer 2024. And with that, I will turn it over to Bruce.
Thanks, Tim. Good evening, board members. In the natural resources category from the bond, there were 2 types of projects. One was acquisition, and that's simply buying land, and we acquired about 100 acres, which is pretty neat, some significant properties throughout the park district. And then the other component of the bond was what we call restoration. That's removing non-native plants and installing native plants, and in other cases, it was reshaping streams and things to create more natural contours. And we're now down to a little less than the final $1 million and $11 million package. So we're getting pretty close to the end, which is exciting. Can you move to the next slide, please? One of our big remaining projects is Raleigh Park. In 2017, we created with the community a concept plan out there where we tried to do some gentle remodeling to kind of bring forward things that were important to the community that we could offer. One of those things that was really strong was there's a stream at the site that goes through a pipe. And believe it or not, that stream and that pipe going into the swimming pool. To make a long story short, we went through an extensive design process to bring the stream out of the pipe, what we call daylighting. And the stream, we got great bids on the project, but it's just been really slow moving through the permitting process. We are finally going to be ready this coming summer to do the actual construction. And along with that, there's a habitat restoration component. That picture on the far right shows folks who are actually removing non-native plants from the hillside from the park area up towards the school. And there was also a trail component to this project, about 2,000 feet of soft surface trail. And that was it's just about done. We expect it to be done by now, but the contractor's still working on that. But as you can see in the center picture, we're really making great progress. So staff are excited, and I know the public can't wait to get out there and use those. Next slide, please. And then our final big project is up at the Bronson Creek Greenway up in the northeast part of the park district. This is a 25-acre acquisition that was made about 5 years ago. And it's another one where we've been through a pretty extensive design process. And what we're doing out there is we're restoring some of the historic contours to the floodplain and to the edge of the stream, as well as modifying a farm pond that's been out there for about 100 years to make it better habitat for wildlife, in particular for turtles and frogs. We'll also have some great water quality benefits. Up on the hillside behind all of this, there'll be oak habitat plantings and some prairie plants, as well as some space for future public access. So we're really thrilled about all of those things. Next slide, please. And the goal really is to wrap up some of the tail end of some of the restoration projects that are still going on out there. Do these two big construction projects this summer and then really tail off by the end of the 24-25 fiscal year, so we can tie the bow on and tell the public we did what we said we were going to do. Last slide, please. This is not a great picture, but it is one of my favorite stories from the bond. One day I was out here on the Waterhouse Trail just north of Highway 26. It was shortly after we constructed this fantastic boardwalk, which stretches from one neighborhood to the other and really creates some great connectivity across the district. And I see this little girl in this valley who I came to learn was her grandfather. And I noticed that she was handing him grapes. And if you look really carefully in his hand, he's holding a Barbie fishing pole. And they threaded the grapes onto the hook, and they were fishing about 3 inches of water out here. And what I loved about it was it created this amazing public access opportunity that wasn't there before. And we see people out there all the time. We see runners, we see walkers, people using wheelchairs. And to me, this really exemplifies like the bond really served the whole community in a lot of different ways. Some of them expected, some of them unexpected, but we also provided these opportunities, right, to access nature and to have outdoor recreation and to live a healthy lifestyle. And to me, like this picture kind of says it all. We brought people together. So we're here to answer any questions you might have and go from there.
Just a simple question. I'm curious with Mountain View Champions Park saying we didn't have any bids. Is that a common occurrence? Can you try to guess it? Do you have any additional concerns trying to get bids for the next go around? Just curious if that's of greater concern or not.
This year, with the projects that we put out to bid, there weren't a lot of contractors overall bidding on projects. We had Lower East that went out to bid as well. I think in the end, we had two that looked at the project. So when we had bid out this project, there was just very little interest, and we actually tried to rebid it out, thinking somebody would try to pick it up in the fall, but only got a little bit of interest. So I think sometimes it's just the timing of it. We do like to bid projects out end of February, early March, to draw up as much interest as we can, because then they just try to get all the projects they can for the year. So yeah, just I think the timing of it this year, just there was not a lot of interest.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any comments, questions? Thank you very much for the context on the photo. That was great. I'm sorry that if you had to use words when we. All right, we are moving on to the board.
Yes, Jared's going to give us an overview. Changes in financial reporting. Hard to follow fishing though. Good evening, board members. Jared Isaacson, Finance Director. I'm here this evening to talk about two different items. The first being some approval thresholds for our purchasing and our contracts and procurements. In this last spring, the Oregon Senate passed Bill 1047, amending ORS, or Oregon Revised Statutes 279, which really governs how local governments go about doing procurements. And specifically, they increased the thresholds for procurements and contracts. As a local district, we have the option of setting our own thresholds and not necessarily following the state thresholds. Previous to House Bill 1047 being passed, we were in line with the state thresholds, and staff is recommending, and we're bringing this subject up tonight to discuss increasing those thresholds. This would require us to amend DCP 5, which would require a public hearing And therefore we would bring that back at a future board meeting. But the one area in which we would not, and if staff would recommend that we don't follow the state guidelines, is for the general manager, director, and designee level, and the board of director level of being 300,000 instead of the state chose 250,000. And give you a little background as to why we chose 300,000 for that is that we reached out to others within the state, some local, some a little further away, to see what it is that their levels were for their governing body approval thresholds. The city of Hillsborough has 350,000, several at 150,000, Prosper Portland at 500,000. There were even some that were unlimited. I did like that Lane County was unlimited if the contract was identified in an approved budget. If not, then it was 150,000. So putting some stipulations in there. Ultimately, staff liked the threshold of 300,000 to match Washington counties. So this was a little bit of context as to what some of our sister agencies and other local governments are doing. And then ultimately looking at the contract and procurement thresholds, increasing the different forms of procurement at each of those areas, whether it be small, intermediate, or formal procurements. The one area that isn't affected is personal services and architect and engineering contracts. Those are not affected and are the only contracts types that are allowable for a direct appointment for procurement of less than 100,000. So those types of contracts would not change. Before I moved on to financial reporting, is there any questions, discussions that we'd like to have on these thresholds? You want me to go back to look at what we're proposing?
In terms of discussion, I think the proposal makes sense to me. When I was reading this, that we would be talking about it, that tracks with me. I think I've got a lot of trust in the THPRD team. So I think that it makes sense to similar levels to what our peers are at across the state.
Good. Okay. That's good. Moving on to talk about our financial board report. Each month we prepare items that we have listed on the screen, our bills in excess of $1,000, our a general fund financial summary, including program and other resources, our program and general government expenditures, and bar charts of resources and expenditures. We also provide capital project report. We provide a bond capital project report and a system development charges report. I did receive a little feedback ahead of time from Felicita.
Get me out.
I appreciate it. She likes the general fund summary and the AP checklist. She felt that the capital project and the bond project reports were a little confusing. And to be honest, they are a little confusing to me as well. It is not how I would choose to present some financial information. So in preparing for this GM report this evening, I also reached out to other agencies. So I reached out to Ben Park and Rec. I reached out to City of Beaverton and a couple other cities. And a couple of things came to mind as to the frequency of reporting. Is monthly too much? I think annually is not enough. I think semi-annually is not enough. I do like the idea of quarterly reporting, which is in fact what Bend Park and Rec has just started quarterly reporting to their board on financials, as well as City of Beaverton is transitioning away from monthly to quarterly for their presentations. One of the things that I really wanted to provide in a quarterly financial report is detailed enough information without getting too much into the weeds. A little example, $1,000 was 0.01% of the fiscal year 23 materials and services expense. 1% is $100,000. And so just to get an idea, I asked our staff to produce a check report at 100,000, and that was 3 checks. So I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere where we're not producing reports that are so granular that you're looking at 0.01%, but are meaningful, and that you're not looking at 3 transactions for a month or for a quarter. So I think there's a fine balance that we can come with that to create these updated reports. I also want to bring forth meaningful reports in a clear and understandable format. And sometimes that's going to be me giving it over to communications to say, am I speaking too much financialese? And so with that, I appreciate Director Monteblanco's feedback thus far. Some of the other things that I've seen in other financial reports was one of them that I kind of liked was a personnel update, where it provided an update on how staffing levels were in comparison to budget, whether they were down, whether they were right in line, talking about new hires versus those that have left and moved on. I also liked high-level updates kind of on a percentage spent versus received, more than a graphical representation rather than numbers, bar charts or graphs of financial data. I thought those things were definitely more meaningful than just straight numbers. With that, I am open to any more comments, questions, discussion that we'd like to have this evening.
I like the idea of quarterly. I mean, I read it. I don't think in the terms that I've sat on here, I've ever once pulled anything out and said something's wrong here. Do I need to know we spent $566 on Jimmy John's one day? Like it's like so really into the weeds. I don't think we definitely need that kind of information. I like the idea of hearing personnel and stuff like that. And I'm not too worried as much, especially since we have such a stellar audit committee and we have a stellar budget committee and whatnot that's looking into these things. And we get that later that, yeah, I'm appreciative of it. And I totally support the quarterly. I feel like that's more manageable of your guys' time and stuff too. So, yeah, that's where I stand.
Other comments?
More. Where's my thought? Yeah, quarterly, yes, like that. I legit thought you had to, we were legally had to look at $100 and above. So now I'm like, oh, this is just silly. And I know it makes me then get in the weeds, which does not help you. I love it, but it doesn't help any of you. So I'm mindful of that. I love a narrative. It's just, it's overwhelming to look at pages and pages of Excel sheets. So anything that you can point out trends, here's a number you might notice that's really low. Here's why, is really helpful to me. And I think in our budget process, we just have this it's so clear. You look at our budget, our board, our our budget binder, and there's like this commitment to transparency and understanding. And like, let's make sure that if anybody picks up our packet, that they're like, they can see, understand some of this stuff, like, no more acronyms. But no, I'm so appreciative that you're even exploring this. This is great. Thank you.
Kind of on that point, I was thinking, like, I love looking at the numbers. It's just like really interesting. But I do love the idea of something like an abstract that can like give us a little bit more of what we need to keep our eyes on as we go through. Because there is so much information. I'm sure there's a lot that we don't really need to check in on. But it's always cool to know what we should be keeping an eye out for.
I'm assuming if we don't like quarterly, we can always go back.
Can always go back.
For a slight innovation to things in a smarter way. I think we all know our jobs is to be great owners of the fiscal information at all times. Also, none of us do that full time as a job, so I'm sure we have room to be helped along. So anything that we can do to help us, help you, help us to help you, I appreciate it. So
I think I would like to, if it's okay with the board, skip December's monthly report. Use that time to create an example of a quarterly report to bring back in January to look at, probably of the first quarter of this year. Because then we'll have concrete numbers in January for that. And then we can make adjustments from there.
Seems reasonable.
if you've got a line. Thank you.
You.
Okay. Agenda item number 9, Gary and Tim. Welcome back.
Thank you for having us. I'm Gary Keg, the district's planning and development manager, and with me is Tim Bonnet, our development supervisor. And we're excited to be here tonight to give you some background and insight on how we develop trails in the district. So we've got a short presentation that I'll run through, and then Tim and I will be here to answer any questions you may have. So our Park Services Division provides the full life cycle of parks and trails, from the beginning, the design process, all the way through the land acquisition, development stage, and then the ongoing care and oversight of the trails or parks. And within the division, you can see the groups that we have there, the planning, design development, nature trails, and maintenance teams. And the development projects that we're typically work on include parks, trails, facilities, but we're also looking at redevelopment, replacement of existing assets on our teams. And as you know, the funding for these projects comes from a variety of sources. We have the 2008 bond measure, which you heard a little bit about tonight. Right now we have Metro's local share program that we're using some of that funding. We have various grants, and then we have our system development charges program that we use for projects. And tonight what we're going to do is focus on trail development, which is typically coordinated with the planning and design teams, but it does include members of all our departments throughout the process, so that we make sure that we have a successful trail at the end. So here you can see the district's trail system map. The red lines represent the regional trails. Blue lines are community trails. And the green lines are on there. They're trails that leave our district or come into our districts. They're neighbors' trails. The solid red or blue solid lines are trails that are already developed. And the dashed lines or the dotted lines are the ones that are the gaps. And as you can imagine, the gaps that we have are the complicated ones. We've done all the low-hanging fruits so far, and we've got a good system. And the gaps have a lot of challenges that include steep slopes, wetlands, natural areas, you got a highway to get across, and utilities, and then ownership. as well. So for prioritization, trails and in-park developments, we start with these guiding documents that you see here. We have a comprehensive plan, which includes our 5-year strategy plan. We also have a revision action plan, which we have that helps guide us in what and understanding what the community wants. And then we have our functional plans, which help tell us how to build it and how to maintain the facilities. With all these plans, each year we bring to you our 5-year CIP from the SDC program. As part of the budget process, we typically come in February or March and ask you to adopt that 5-year list, which gives us our forecast for the next 5 years of funding for SDCs. And that's been one of our primary sources for funding lately. Our development timeline illustrates the different phases of development. This is for trails and for parks. So you've seen this before. The actual timeline depends on the complexity of the project, the level of community engagement that we think we want to go through, as well as the construction season. We establish a timeline based on the best opportunity to engage with the public, which is typically in this from spring to fall. So we can tag on to some of the events that we're working on to get input from our public. And then we're always trying to target summer construction. Constructing in the dry weather is way less expensive. So that is something that we use for putting our timelines together. But as I mentioned earlier, the design and permitting is going to impact this significantly, which we'll talk a little bit about tonight. So there's 3 common challenges that we have working with trails that we'll just go through here. As I mentioned previously, the complexity of the project will influence the duration of the timeline. Existing conditions like natural slopes, utilities, something that we're always looking for in trails. As you can imagine, we have those steep slopes left. Accessibility is another one that we're looking at. How our trails interact with existing transportation systems like a road, crosswalks, light rail. And then the cost, the first is going to impact the last one, costs, which we'll take a look at tonight as well. These projects you'll see as we go through some of these items, they're complex, but we're really fortunate to have a great team who's really dedicated, understands the process, and has really helped us move through these projects really well lately. So existing conditions, these really can help, well, they really determine where trails laid out. As a designer, when you go through that first phase of the survey, and you start finding all the slopes, the natural areas, the wetlands, the utilities, that trail starts to lay itself out because we want to avoid all those. So it's always the first option to see what does that look like. We've got typically your permits are going through the city of Beaverton or Washington County as our main contact. If we're in a natural area, like you see down there at the bottom, be talking to CWS more likely and getting a permit through them. And then the wetlands or waterways, we end up working with the Army Corps of Engineers and Division of State Lands. They have a joint permit application. That application alone can take up to 9 months to go through. And then utilities. A lot of the items you don't see that are in there. We end up working with both private and public utilities. And as we're going through those processes, we're always trying to meet all of their requirements. Each entity has their own requirements and they don't always align. So a lot of times we are negotiating with several entities to try to come to an agreement on a trail alignment when it comes to the utilities. And then the last piece there is land ownership. We all know our trails are long. We cross a lot of property lines. There's a lot of negotiations that go on early in the process, and our goal is to try to own the land. But if we can't, we'll try to get easements. And there are many times that we're talking to the landowner as well as entities who already have easements on their land. So there's many layers in the land acquisition for these trails as well. So accessibility, this is tied to a lot of the existing conditions as well, but it's a little different. In our designs, we really work hard to make our trails as accessible as possible. We're looking at the running slopes, we're looking at the cross slopes, we're looking at the radiuses of the trails, which you can see there in the top right. It's a good example of the radiuses. and put it all together to be as successful as we can and to meet our standards. But there are times where we have to deviate from that. And those are situations where if we don't deviate, we won't have a trail at all in those situations. So when we run into those, we really look at, evaluate all the options for those and make sure that we can meet as many of our standards as we can in situations. And then street crossings, as I mentioned earlier, these are really technical. The bottom right there is a light rail, this railroad light rail station or West Side Trail and Waterhouse Trail right at the northeast corner of Nature Park interact. Those take a lot of coordination and a lot of design that you wouldn't expect. Every cross slope counts, every distance counts, and you're dealing with a lot of agencies in these crossings. So they're complicated, and a lot of times we need to listen to those. Well, we need to listen to those agencies to make sure we create safe crossings for our patrons. And then common challenge is costs. You can see the average cost there. It's expensive. Trails, we're running about $4.3 million per mile. That includes design, right of way, and construction costs. So that's an all-in cost. And with that, we find that a lot of the funding that we're using for trails is coming from federal funding. And the federal funding adds another layer because they treat trails just like a road or a highway. So they don't separate us. When we're only 12 feet wide, they treat us like we're any other transportation system. So that adds another complexity to our projects. But without the funding, we wouldn't get a lot of the trails built like we're doing right now. So, and then what else there? And the SDCs, right now, the SDCs, we have a few requirements. One in our methodology is we can only spend 42% of our SDCs overall on trail work. So we're tracking that. And SDCs, right now, we're using them for leverage to help get some of the bigger transportation funds. So they've been really critical for us to meet that matching piece that's required for us. So opportunities. Right now, the last several years, we've done a very good job of working with developers. A lot of you've all seen us come in executive session and a regular session with concept plans to work with developers. And it's a key partnership where we're working with the developers who are building new neighborhoods and having them put the trails in as they're building those neighborhoods so they're there from the get-go. And there's a great partnership for us and them. It's a good selling point for them. Their neighborhoods have trails. For us, it's nice to get in before everybody moves in. It's a lot easier to get through the process when they're doing all the grading already, and you're not in someone's backyard right away. We're going to do it later. And grant funding, we've done a very good job in the last several years, as you know, picking up some fairly large grants. You know, last year we got $1.9 million to do the design of the West Side Trail Bridge that goes over Highway 26. We got another $2 million add to, I think, 3.8 we already had for the Beaverton Creek Trails. So we're doing a good job, I feel, of getting the grants that we need to move these projects along on there. And then the last bullet point there is long-range planning. We do a lot of legwork up front to make sure that we're at the table when our partners are building their transportation plans, their regional transportation plans, their regional trail plans. And that being on those lists and on those maps opens up opportunities for us in the future for grants and for partnering with them. So it's something that our planning department works hard at and has done a good job of being asked to the table a lot to get our input. So with that, Tim and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Tim's our local expert on permitting construction.
Praise.
Praise, yeah. No, it's part of me, as I'm sitting here, part of me is just like, this is like our most underappreciated asset in a way. And part of me said, like, and part of it is just like me as a user, because I go to the nature park and I go to events, and like, you know, everyone's shaped by their own experience as a user. But my goodness, like what we have, especially compared to neighbors, like it is just amazing how it ensures communities are connected, that people can walk to the grocery store, and like the fact that we're like, we continually improve, and our commitment to ensuring that like everyone can partake is just, I mean, it's amazing work. So thank you.
I just had a question. So, what is the normal lifespan of a trail? And then when we do, because now we have all of these trails and we're going to keep getting more trails, and that comes out, the new development usually comes out of SCCs, but the replacement and upkeep does not come out of SCCs, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of that comes out of our capital bond from our general fund.
Well, yes, you know, right now we're targeting grants to help us
Gotcha.
with that. We've got a grant in right now for helping us repave nature park, some of the trail in nature park.
Okay.
But you're correct. The general fund is where we look for helping to repay the trails. And an asphalt trail, what do you think, 15, 20 years?
15 to 20 without
Yeah.
any issues.
Yeah.
Just curious. Thank you.
Others? Good. Yeah, I recently, took a little self-initiative to get out every morning and start, you know, pounding the trail pavement in the spring. And many of which I have not been on, and some of which I've just been on very briefly, but, awesome. I mean, I was on, you know, that exact view. I was up in Bethany on like these, you know, boardwalks and birds, and I mean, it was really, the diversity of things that you can see and experience and access, and the folks that were out there using them, to earlier comments from Bruce, really impressive. And I'm glad Tia brought up kind of the maintenance aspect, of course, and that's something we're always mindful of, is to not build the Taj Mahal and then watch it all kind of crumble over the next 20 years. So, but thank you for sharing the process, and yeah, they are impressive and not inexpensive. So I understand why. So, all right. Well, I think that, thank you all very much for joining us. I'm going to get us out of here. So this meeting is adjourned.